Again, this is a robbery gone wrong. And Kristopher Love says at one point he heard the shot. All he did was grab the purse, and then he heard the shot, implying that he wasn't the shooter. But how does that match up when we heard Kristopher Love's jailhouse phone call with his girlfriend? Let's see.
Yeah. I'm serious. I'm always just trying to get a lawyer and I'm trying to fight through this, man. It's just fucked up that you had that gun, man. I just wish you shot that girl with that gun. You should have got her. Probably gonna do it away with her. Whatever happened, I'm with you, man. I said, whatever happened, I'm with you. I got your back. I ain't gonna leave, man.
Okay, Jared, if you shot that girl with that gun, you should have thrown it away, to which Kristopher Love says, I know. Not a good day for the Kristopher Love defense team, is it?
Yeah, that's not really a statement you want to have admitted against your client, but when you consider the context of the statement and the entire conversation, again, this is probably aimed on the head of the pin, but that statement could have been interpreted by him being the two of you. But again, not a great statement to have admitted against your client.
No, not at all. And you know, we're talking... Oh, I'm sorry. You were saying, Jared?
You would expect him to deny that.
Yeah, you'd expect him to deny that. And it's going to be a tough road because, remember, if he's found guilty, this is a death penalty eligible case. And we're again in Texas, which is a little bit different than the rest of the country. But just to give you an idea about some death penalty statistics, I want you to take a look at this. This is the national death sentencing rate, and it is continuing to decline, even though you see so much of it happening in Texas more than maybe other states. But, Jared, as we look at this, there's a whole kind of discussion about whether or not this is this archaic? I'm curious your perspective. We've covered a lot of death penalty eligible cases. Is it archaic to have the death penalty still around?
It is, for a number of reasons. Mostly, if you want to look at it from a practical perspective, it's just not an effective deterrent for the crimes like this that people commit, which are premeditated crimes of passion. It's not an effective deterrent. There are now cases upon cases upon cases in the hundreds, if not thousands, of actually innocent people being exonerated. You really have these two, for people who are generally pro-death penalty, there's now a substantial body of evidence showing it's A, not an effective deterrent, and B, that it's not actually administered effectively because we're not catching the people and punishing the people who are actually guilty of these crimes.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion on both sides, and we cover it a lot here on the network. Again, it's reserved for the worst of the worst, and this is a really, really horrific crime. But before we get to the verdict, let's now go on with the prosecution's closing argument, their last attempt to convince this jury that, hey, this man was hired, and he was hired to kill. Take a look.
Along with Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, intended to kill Miss Hatcher. He was the person who pulled the trigger. You also heard a lot of testimony about Brenda Delgado and how she did not like Dr. Hatcher and how she wanted to eliminate her. And at some point, you may have thought, whose trial is it? But there's a reason we had to bring you that testimony. You needed to know the backstory to understand how we got to the events that happened on September 2nd of 2015. You needed to hear how this defendant met two females, and on the very first day he met them, he agreed to kill someone he didn't even know. It was important for you to learn that information. And so now you have the task, as the judge stated, to judge the credibility of the witnesses. You have Crystal Cortez, and I'm sure Mr. Johnson will get up here and tell you how Crystal Cortez probably can't tell you If the sun is shining outside, and you believe her or not believe her. Because she told so many lies and so many stories about this offense. And then you heard the defendant's version of the offense. And you were tasked to determine, who do I believe? Who's telling the truth? What really happened? And I'm going to tell you, it was a cast of characters that came in and dealt with these people, but these were their friends. These is who they hung out with. This is who they chose to be with. However, Crystal Cortez's story can be corroborated by several different pieces of evidence. My co-counsel stood up and told you at the beginning of this trial that he was going to prove to you this case by witness testimony, by physical evidence, and we did that. The first person that corroborates...
Prosecution makes a good point. This is about who do you believe, and according to them, Kristopher Love killed Dr. Kendra Hatcher for drugs and money at the request, the orders of Brenda Delgado, the ex-girlfriend of Miss Hatcher's current boyfriend, well, then boyfriend. Really awful story, awful set of circumstances. But that was the prosecution's argument. Let's see what the defense said in their closing argument. Take a look.
In here saving her butt. Saving her butt in the fate that she deserves. And she got it. She got it. State says, hey, we'll give you a slap, a virtual slap on the wrist in this case. Because we need you to come in here and appear believable in front of these 12 people that are going to decide this case. And if you've heard all the discrepancies, every story she told, everything makes no sense. And it persisted all the way up until this year, a couple of weeks ago. A couple of weeks ago. And we know that as she got on this witness stand, she continues to lie to you. She continues to lie and do whatever she has to do to manipulate not only these folks, because they haven't signed off on her deal yet. They just promised it. But see, they got to make sure that, number one, she comes in here and gets him convicted, and then they're going to dance her up in front of Brenda Delgado and see if she can use those puppet strings to convict her. And she'll say or do anything that she has to. That story will change however it needs to change for her to accomplish what she wants, and that's to save Crystal Cortez.
All right, Jared, what the defense seemed to really be doing right there is putting the blame on Crystal Cortez, that you can't believe her. And really, is the prosecution's whole case made with Crystal Cortez's testimony? What do you think?
Crystal Cortez is the prosecution's entire case, and it really is wholly inappropriate as a matter of law for a prosecutor to say this is a he said, she said case, and if you believe her, you have to convict, which is essentially the argument that the prosecution was making, is that she's more credible than he is. The prosecution has the burden in every criminal case, and the prosecution has the sole burden to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not just who do you believe more. That's basically the standard in a civil case where you're fighting over money. And so that really should have been objected to by the defense, and the defense did have the right position. The state's entire case, the government's entire case, flows through this one witness, because if this really is a robbery gone wrong, you can't execute this man. All right? If it's just a murder by accident, or if it's something that happened in the course of a robbery gone wrong, if it's not premeditated, that keeps the needle out of his arm. And that's really what they're hanging their hat on.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's see what the jury came back with. Let's see which version they believed when we come back from our break, because we're going to reveal the verdict. Stay tuned. All right, everybody, we've come to the conclusion of the Kristopher Love case. What did the jury decide? Let's see.
Will the presiding juror rise, please? Sir, has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is your verdict as follows? We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
It is.
And that is the unanimous verdict of the jury.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir, for your deliberations. The good news is that we will be taking the day off tomorrow. We'll resume for the punishment phase at 8:30 in the morning.
Okay, so they found him guilty of capital murder. The question is, would that same jury sentence him to death? Would they recommend that? Let's see what the verdict was in the penalty phase.
Received a unanimous verdict from the jury. Mr. Love, would you stand, please, sir? Having been found guilty by the jury of capital punishment and the jury having answered a unanimous yes to special issue number 2 and unanimous no to unanimous yes to special issue number 1 and a unanimous no to special issue number 2, it is now the duty of the court to assess your punishment. Is there any legal reason why punishment should not be assessed?
No reason at all.
All right, there being no legal reason, it's therefore the order, judgment, and decree of this court that you be taken by the Sheriff of Dallas County and by her safely held for transfer to an authorized receiving agency of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, wherein you shall be confined until the director of that institution receives an order by this court to carry out a sentence of death by lethal injection. Good luck to you, sir.
Your Honor, the defense would request the poll of the jury.
Juror number 1, is that your verdict?
Yes.
I'm going to start here on the first row to my left. Yes. Is that your verdict? Death by lethal injection. Juror number 2?
Yes.
Juror number 3?
Yes.
Juror number 4? Yes. Juror number 5?
Yes.
Juror number 6?
Yes.
Juror number 7?
Yes.
Juror number 8?
Yes.
Juror number 9?
Yes.
Juror number 10?
Yes.
Juror number 11?
Yes.
Juror number 12?
Yes.
Thank you for your service and your verdicts. It is now the time for the family to give a victim impact statement.
That's Kristopher Love hearing his fate, death by lethal injection. Jared, can't say we're surprised given the gravity of this crime. The question is, will he realistically be executed? Because I know there's so much discussion about the attempt to appeal and whether or not, it takes years. Do you think he will actually be executed in the next, 5 years, 10 years? How does that happen?
Well, I think that's impossible to say and put a time frame on it. I don't know enough about what their appellate issues would be, perhaps whether he would be asked to cooperate against Ms. Delgado, who is still pending trial, and whether that might affect the pendency of his death sentence. But what you do know is this: Texas by far executes the most people in the United States of America, and disproportionately young black men like Mr. Love. And I think that what we discussed a little earlier in the show is the other 2 people who were involved in this incident, according to Ms. Cortez's own admission, the planning and carrying out, if you take the prosecution's theory at face value of this premeditated murder, neither of them are going to be facing the same punishment that Mr. Love is.
And we can't forget the fact that we're talking about his life when really the life that was taken was Dr. Kendra Hatcher. And we saw the testimony of Bonnie Jamison, who's her mother. She provided some testimony for the court. Let's listen to what she had to say.
First of all, I want to thank the jury. I can only imagine how hard this has been for you to be away from your family. And here it is, a holiday. And those of you with the little ones want to be home with your kids. And I just want to go home and give them a hug. And you are so blessed. And just take care of your kids. But I started to write this as I never called you by your name. To me, for 3 years, you have only been known as the shooter. And I will never call you by your name because you are just the shooter. Until I found out you were the executioner of my daughter. You didn't shoot her. You executed my daughter for absolutely no reason in the world. So I'm going to start to read what I was hoping that I would be able to read. I was going to pass it up, but I can't pass up this opportunity. We often hear people say that they just live a normal life. Well, let me tell you, executioner, our lives have been anything but normal for 3 years and 57 days. 3 years and 57 days, we have lived this. No answers. Why? So I'm here to tell you that your life also has been anything but normal for also 3 years and 57 days.
Wow. And really, there couldn't be more of a true statement. This young woman was taken for absolutely no reason. Jared, she was taken for drugs and money. That's the value of a human life here. Pretty incredible to hear from this mother speaking.
Sure.
Right, Jared?
Yeah, I agree. It's an absolutely heinous crime.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful in a lot of different ways.
The question is, what is the jury going to do? Are they going to sentence to death for this, or are they going to agree that life in prison, which is the other alternative, warrants punishment for a crime like this?
Right, and they sentenced him to death by lethal injection. Pretty incredible. Jared, Whaley, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. All right, everybody. So I'm going to be signing off. Bob Bianchi is going to be signing in, and he's going to guide you through officer-involved shooting cases that we covered here on Law and Crime this past year. We'll be right back.